Like the Longhouse and all the families lived in there. This is another Iroquois Nation story. And the problem with this village was that every year, in the fall around harvest time, this giant flying head monster used to come out of the mountains. And it was like an 8-foot tall head with big sharp teeth and like bushy eyebrows, like raw, just big giant flying head. And it would come down into the village, and they could hear it howling in the hills for days, and they knew it was coming. And they would try to hide, and it would always find them. And it always ate like 1 or 2 people every year. And they didn't know who was going to get eaten, and their life was filled with fear and terror, and it was not fun. So, every year the giant flying head would come, and then they would try to like hide, and they'd be like, "Oh, I found you," and it would eat you or whatever. So, but there was this one girl one year, she was sort of getting older as the years went by, and she saw the terror that her family faced, and she decided she was going to do something about it. She was the only one brave enough to come up with an idea. So, when they heard the giant flying head in the hills, and they knew it was coming down soon, because they could hear it, up in the hills, everyone went to go away and hide. She did not hide. She went to the main fire pit in the center of the longhouse, and she started cooking her mother's soup recipe, which was this amazing, delicious soup. It had like oatmeal, except soup. And it had like deer and carrots and potatoes and things that are good for you, and it was all a soup, right? It was really good. And it smelled delicious. It smelled so good. And she just sat there, and she knew the giant flying head was coming, but she just kept working on the soup, and she's cooking this big thing of soup. And it was delicious. And all of a sudden, sometimes you can tell like someone's looking at you from behind or whatever. So she felt like someone was watching her, and she turned around, and right there in the doorway of the longhouse was like the 8-foot tall giant flying head. It was scary eyes, big teeth. And she was like, "Oh, hi," and he said, "What are you cooking? It smells delicious." And she said, "This is my mom's best secret soup recipe. It's really good." And he's like, "I would like to have some of that soup." And she says, "No, it's not for you. It's for the rest of the people in the village. I didn't make enough for you." And he said, "You should give me some of that soup, or else I'll have to eat you." And she said, "Okay. I'll make you a bowl of soup." So she grabs this big bowl, and she's sort of ladling out the soup into the bowl for the giant flying head. And he's watching her kind of, and he's like, he's drooling. It smells so good, He's, "This is going to be really good." She's putting the soup in the thing. And he doesn't notice, but while she's ladling the soup out of the big pot, she also a couple of times scoops down, and you know how you use like rocks to make your fire circle? So there's these like red hot rocks around the edge of the fire, and she puts a couple of those in the bowl too, and they sink down to the bottom, and they're like, just these red hot, almost molten rocks. And then she turns around with this big bowl, and she says, "Here you go." And he's like, this is she tosses it in his mouth, whatever, and he takes the whole bowl and all the soup, and then like all the red hot rocks are in his mouth, and he goes, "Whoa!" And he goes shooting out through the door, like it's like a giant flying head hole, and just whoa, and he goes shooting off, and they never see him again. So she was a hero because she drove away the giant flying head monster.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is make
I have this one.
Yes, the moral of the story is make soup.
Be brave.
Don't hide from. Be brave.
Don't hide from what you're afraid of.
Always make enough for the
That
giant flying
sounds
head.
suspicious.